I'm Jenny Rosencrans with University of Maryland Extension, and it's April. April is the perfect month to get all kinds of stuff done for your garden. We can do things inside and we can do things outside. But first of all, we're going to start with an excellent idea to get your seeds started for your garden. So here we have a bunch of parsley and some basil and more parsley. I always like to plant a lot of parsley because when you plant it outside, the yellow swallowtail caterpillars love to eat it down. And if you have a whole bunch of parsley, then you'll actually have some for yourself too. To get your eggs started, it's an excellent idea. Basically, you take any kind of egg you want. These are brown eggs, but you could use white eggs. You could even use colorful eggs. If you have a neighbor that has chickens and gives you eggs, even better. So what I usually do is I usually just sort of cut it in half, and then I just try to go ahead and make it so that the edges are fairly decent. There's always going to be a little bit of breakage. And then I go ahead and dump the egg in there because I don't want to waste it. And now I have 2 eggshells. Let me go ahead and do another one. This one I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit on the top so I have more of a container. And just keep a little bit like that. Take the top off, and there you go. Okay, good. Now, what you should do is rinse it in water because there's always some of the egg white in there, and you don't really want that egg white in there because it could lead to different bacteria growing, that sort of stuff. And you want to keep your containers as clean as you can. There we go. Let's go ahead and do this. Now, the first thing I need to do is put the eggs out of the way. There we go. All right. Like any type of container, your egg container, needs to have a hole in the bottom. So I have found that it's easier for me if I go ahead and put a paper towel in the bottom to give me something to push on. And then I take a paper clip like this and just put a hole in the bottom, just like that. There we go. Now this one's falling apart a little bit, but I think it'll still work. Same for this. This is going to be a small container. Oops, sorry. Eggshells are really harder than you think. The reason why we're using the eggshells is that the calcium in the eggshell can be utilized by the plant. Maybe not this season, but if we plant them out in the garden, the calcium from the eggshell will be eventually available for the plants later on. So that worked out a little bit better. All right, there we go. Now, I always like to go ahead and label my containers so I know what I've got. So in this case, let's see now, I'm going to do a little smiley face. That will be for parsley. And let's see, there we go. Another, I like to do smiley faces. There we go. That will be for some basil. And I think I need to have more than one basil, so we're going to do the small one. Always good to have smiley faces. There you go. So, next step, really easy. You get seed starting potting soil, which is right here, and you just lightly spoon it in. Now, I know I've told you guys many, many times that your soil needs to be light and fluffy. Every type of plant will go ahead and take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and then they will go ahead and take the carbon and release the oxygen. And the oxygen is for the roots of the plant to breathe. So anytime you squish the soil down or tamp it down too hard, you're squishing all the oxygen out, and the plants never do so well. So this is good. I'm going to move these little guys back here. There we go. So we can go ahead and start our new batch. Keep this little guy with his happy smile. There we go. And I'll move this little guy back and use this one too. There we go. And you really don't need more than that one little bit of hole there for good drainage. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I need to use, this is parsley. Now parsley is an annual, and annual seeds grow very, very quickly. Perennial seeds are nice to work with too, but perennial seeds take a lot longer to germinate. They have to think about it. They want to make sure that the soil temperature is right. They want to make sure that the atmosphere is right. They know that they only have that one time to germinate. Whereas it seems to me that annual seeds are a lot more resilient about it. They know that there's a lot of, an annual's whole job is to go ahead and have lots of flowers and lots of seeds. So if they come out a little bit early, they know that they have lots of their relatives that could still go ahead and take over. So here's some of the seeds from the parsley. It's real tiny seeds. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle a couple here. Just, there we go. And I'll put that one back in there. Okay, now when you put them in, you do want to water them in, but again, you don't want to go ahead and have so much water that it actually squishes it too much. So what I like to do is I like to just use a little spritzer like this, and the seeds ended up going into the soil a little bit, and it's settling down a little bit. There we go. And they'll be fine. So let's go ahead and do the basil. Again, basil is a wonderful annual. Now basil is easy to grow, but it does have issues. It can get what they call downy mildew, which is the disease that affects the underside of the leaf. So again, I always like to grow a whole bunch of basil. There we go. And try to keep them so that they have really good air circulation around them in the summertime so that they can go ahead, hopefully not catch the downy mildew. There's never a guarantee, but you can always hope. There we go. There we go. Now, when I started these guys in the wintertime, I started them in February. It took them a long time. Actually, I think I started this one in January. It takes them a long time because the sun is at a different angle, and they're not so excited about germinating quite quickly. But now that it is April, these guys will bounce right out. They'll start growing almost immediately. So in a month, at the end of April, because we're doing this from the beginning, at the end of April, I'll be able to plant them out in the garden because it'll be warm enough. The soil will be warm enough, and they will be big enough to go ahead and transplant, which is going to be fabulous. So what I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to go ahead and get a different type of soil. And what we're going to do is take the plants that have already been planted and put them in another container. This is called transplanting them so that they have a chance to get the roots that are growing in here get into a larger container. It's like a step up, going from like kindergarten to first grade in a sense. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I had to wash all these containers, and then I bleached them because I wanted to make sure that they were sterile. And then I'm going to go ahead and just fill them up with potting soil. There we go. And then with this egg, I'm sorry, you have to crack a couple eggs to make a really nice omelet. And so I'm going to go ahead and crack a couple eggs for that. There we go. And just push it down into the soil. There we go. And I'm going to try to do a couple more. Now when you're working with the soil, you want to make sure that the soil is moist enough to hold water. There we go. Let's grab this guy right here. Say hi. There we go. Squish, 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 squish. You want it to have warm enough, you want to have enough moisture to hold the soil together into like a ball. So like that, that's pretty much like a ball. And that's good. If it doesn't have that much moisture, you have to wet it before you use it. Usually when you buy new potting soil, the soil is moist enough. So now that we have both of those done, we still have to water them in. Now we can go ahead and use this in the beginning just to get it straight, like this. And for the first day, this is fine. But from now on, when I water, I'm actually going to have to use a container and just pour water over top of them. But there we go. Here, let's go ahead and move this guy up. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and keep these guys under the lights for a little bit of time, just so that they can go ahead and continue to grow upwards. If I had them in a window, I would go ahead and have to turn the eggs every week a little bit. Well, actually, I do it every day because they'll have a tendency to lean to the light. And that's normal, that's just fine. But if you have a grow light, that makes it just a lot easier. You can go ahead and raise and lower the grow light so that the plants will go ahead and grow up without stretching. So that's kind of fun. And that's an easy way to go ahead and get your plants started, get your garden started now, so that in May you can go ahead and plant them outside and your garden's good to grow. Let's go outside and see what we have to do outside in April. Excellent. I love April because the bulbs are absolutely exquisite starting in April, it seems to me. These little guys right here are a type of daffodil. They're called tete-a-tete, and they're miniatures. They're small in stature, and they're also small in their little flowers too. So they never get really high. You can find them taller if you buy them in, like, say, a garden shop or something like that. But they've been raised in a warmer area where they've had a chance to grow. This is what they usually do. And they have the most wonderful sunny faces. Daffodils have this beautiful little trumpet-like face, which are just so pretty. And the reason why they have it like this is the plant has evolved so that it can go ahead and invite all the pollinators in. It has this beautiful crown of petals here, and then the trumpet. And it's all a way to say to the pollinators, come, come, this is where you need to go for all the good pollen you have. So that's really neat. The other thing that's in bloom this time of year is crocuses. And you really have to get down to enjoy them, in my opinion. They are so beautiful. They have bright, bright colors, mostly the purples. Sometimes you can get blue. They're also white. This one has a stripe on the inside, so you have the two outer petals that are darker, the inside petals are lighter, and you always have this beautiful bright orange pollen. It's just so pretty. And the neat thing about the contrast between purple and orange is they're opposite side of the color wheel, so it always shows up so bright. Now, there's different type of crocuses. So in March, and if I had some of the real teeny tiny ones, they're called Tommies. They're little teeny tiny crocuses, and they bloom earlier. They're much smaller, more delicate. They've already come and gone, whereas these guys are coming up now and beautiful too. Now, some of these right here look a little bit different. These are beautiful right here, whereas these guys here look a little bit wilted, and that's because we had a frost last night. So these are very, very strong, and they can go ahead and take a lot of abuse. But if they're fully opened and we have a frost, then that's what happens. But look, all the other guys look fabulous. You know, these are not bulbs, but they are just fabulous, really early flowering plants. These are what they call Lenten roses. The petals are really bracts, just the same kind of thing as the dogwood is. And these guys right in here are the actual flowers in the center. What's really neat about these is that they started blooming in February when it warmed up a little bit, and then they got really small, and then it warmed up again in March, and now it's April, and they're still doing their beautiful thing. This one is just beginning to open, which I just think is gorgeous. Love the color. So this one is a very deep, almost mahogany purple, whereas this one's faded out a little bit. So you'll have a multicolored one when this is all said and done. So pretty. They come in whites, they come in pinks. The whites actually fade into sometimes a soft green, and sometimes they'll fade to a soft pink. I love hyacinths. To me, they are one of the perfect spring flowers. The colors are exquisite. You can go ahead and be very patriotic with red, white, and blue, or you can go ahead and do the pinks or just the purpley blues. One of the things that I love about these, though, not only are they absolutely beautiful and, as you see, very, very cold tolerant, but the fragrance just rises up and just, it's so welcoming. It's a nice, warm, spicy floral scent that I just absolutely love. The flowers are kind of waxy. This is really nice. And the other thing about these, like daffodils, nothing's going to eat the bulbs of the hyacinths or the daffodils. So when you plant them, they can be here for years and years and years. Daffodils, if you plant daffodils, they'll last generations. So let's go ahead and take a look at some other daffodils. I really love daffodils. Oh my goodness, these are some of my favorite. And what's really neat about these, instead of having the normal trumpet that I showed you before with the tete-a-tetes, these guys have an open or sometimes they call this the butterfly look, where the trumpet is open, but it's still easy for the pollinators to come on in. Aren't they lovely? Now, one thing about daffodils is because nothing eats them, they have a tendency to survive for years and years and years. One of the coolest things to do this time of year when you're driving around the country area, you can see where an old house was because you'll see these daffodils in straight lines like this around the outside of the house or where the house was. If you know who owns the property and you like the daffodils, call them up, see if you can borrow a few of them. What you want to do is you want to realize that even though they're in bloom right now, now is a good time to dig them up because you'll be able to tell what color they are, and you can go ahead and cut them up. Dig them up. You have to go down about almost a foot into the ground because they're down 6 to 8 inches, sometimes even lower than that. And you want to dig them up. You want to separate the bulbs. As soon as you dig them up and separate the bulbs, make sure you keep the colors separated and take the flowers off because the plant will try to go ahead and make seeds. But you'll have like this plant, this flower with this bunch and another flower with another bunch. You can see how large this group is right here. So this definitely needs to be dug up and shared. And you can do it in the fall, but you have no idea where they are sometimes in the fall. I like to do them, this time of year when they're in bloom so I know what I've got, or wait until they start to turn yellow. The other thing I wanted to mention is a lot of people think that they should braid these or whatever. No. These leaves need all the sunshine they could possibly get. So what I've done is I planted daylilies beside them, and I usually plant something in front. So as the foliage slowly dies back, the other plants are growing up, and you notice the other plants instead of the dying foliage. Don't ever do anything with the foliage with these daffodils until they actually turn yellow, and then you can go ahead and cut them off. They're so pretty. Let's take a look, see what else is in bloom. Now these are tulips, and they're going to have to grow a couple more inches higher before they start to bloom. They start out growing the foliage when, I would say March. Some of them are a little bit earlier in February. But they have to have about 8 to 10 inches high of foliage before they'll go ahead and start to bloom. And sometimes you can see the flowers started, and I was checking these and I don't see the flowers started on these yet. I wanted to point out that these guys right here are also daffodils, but notice how they haven't even started to bloom yet. Their flower buds are tightly closed. So you can have daffodils that bloom early, mid, and late season, all through spring, which I think is fabulous. Well, speaking of tulips like these guys, I do have some really early blooming tulips. They're only this tall. They're bright red, and they bloom this time of year. Love it. Let me show this to you. Well, some of the earliest blooming tulips are these little guys right here, and they're called a crocus tulip. Botanical name is humilis, H-U-M-I-L-L-I-S. And they only get to be 2 to 3 feet tall, 3 inches tall, like these little guys. Now, tulips are difficult to keep because our summers are so hot quite often that tulips sometimes just don't survive the heat of the summertime. These have been planted for 3 to 4 years and they still keep coming up, so I'm pretty happy about that. I have some others that have lived for 30 years in my garden, and I think that those are like the Dutch tulips. Anyways, there's all kinds of different tulips like that. Some of them, I do know the fancier ones that have lots and lots of petals, they don't seem to survive more than the first year or so. The other thing about tulips is the flower and the bulb is also very tasty to a lot of critters. So if you have voles, or you have deer, or you have squirrels, or you have chipmunks, they will definitely enjoy them because they're so yummy. Well, we've gone ahead and taken a look at some beautiful blooming flowers that are in April, but there's some chores we could do in the garden. One of the things that we can do this time of year is to go ahead and cut back some of the roses. So let's go ahead and get some tools, and I'll show you how easy it is to cut back some roses. Okay, so these are drift roses, and they're very similar to the roses that are called knockout roses. Both of them have one really cool thing in common. These are resistant to black spot of the leaf of a rose, which is wonderful because black spot is the type of thing that it's a disease that if you have hot, humid weather, which we do, when you think about it in July and August and September, it is always hot and humid. Well, what would happen is the disease would get on the leaf and just basically go through the entire leaf, eating the whole leaf, and the whole leaf would basically be dropped by the plant. And within a week, you'd have this beautiful rose that had all these leaves and all these flowers, and then the next week you'd have this rose that has no leaves and a few flowers, but the whole thing was really kind of falling apart. So having this resistant to black spotted roses means that it can get it, but only if it's really, really horrible weather. And for the most part, it doesn't have it. The only problem with these guys, both the knockout rose and the drift rose, are they're almost sterile. This one has a few little teeny fruits on it, so it is able to go ahead and pollinate a little bit. You can see that there's a little rose hip right there. So the best way to do the pruning is you want to bring it down to about a foot off the ground. Now, there's a couple tools you could use. These are regular bypass pruners, and they operate kind of like scissors do. You always want to keep this straight like this, and you want to go ahead and have this side of the blade so that it's filed always really nice and sharp, because you want to make a sharp, clean cut. A sharp, clean cut will go ahead and heal faster. This is for small work. These are loppers, and this is for something that's larger than your thumb. And I like this one because it has that ratchet, making it easier. It's kind of like having it work for you instead of you doing all the work yourself. But what we're going to use instead are these head shears, which are perfect. Now what's nice about these guys is I can go ahead and be lazy and extend the stems if I wanted to, or the handles. Excuse me, makes a lot of noise too. The other thing, when you're buying one of these, always make sure that it has a bumper of some sort, so that when you're cutting it like that, the shock of the force of cutting it doesn't go up your arms and really hurt your arms and your back. So this one, okay, this is really difficult. You just go on in and you cut. Always making sure that you have really sharp equipment. Makes it a lot easier because it'll heal faster. There we go. I like to go in a circle because it makes it easier for me to keep in mind what's going on. Now these drift roses don't really need to be pruned like a standard rose, which you want to go ahead and always have like a bowl of sunshine on those guys. This one you just want to go ahead and keep it so that you have a lot of new growth. With these guys, they will go ahead and bloom if you have new growth. If you never touch it, you'll have a little bit of flowers on the outside. But now with this one, all of this growth right here that I'm going to rake up will go ahead and start out. Everywhere I've cut, it will go ahead and start putting out new branches. New branches mean more flowers. This will give me lots and lots of colors. I only have a couple more roses to do. But before we go, I want to share a really beautiful plant that's blooming only this time of year. And it's just sort of cool, so come on with me. This is what they call a star magnolia, because when the flowers open up like this, it looks like a star. Now this is similar to the saucer magnolias, but the saucer magnolia would hold the petals more upright like that, like a cup with a saucer. So this one has a little bit of brown on it because we had some cool nights, and when the temperature goes below 32, you're going to get a little bit of frost on it. So in a sense, it kind of looks like a toasted marshmallow. Lightly fragrant, and when they first start opening, there's sort of a pinkish color, but when they open up all the way like this one right here, it's a beautiful white flower. They only bloom in the early springtime, but the whole plant will eventually be completely covered with these gorgeous, beautiful flowers. And I think it's gorgeous. Well, I hope you enjoyed learning how to plant seeds and eggshells. and enjoying my garden of all the different flowers that I have blooming, all the different bulbs and flowers that I have blooming in April. And thank you for joining me in April for Delmarva Gardens right here on Pack 14.